Hello everyone, I hope that you are doing well and good. In this video, I'm going to talk about the stories of Shukra. So, there are multiple stories, and I'll be talking about them one by one. Shukra's penance, the slaying of Kavyamata, and the balance of the gods. In ancient times, when the struggle between the Devas and Asuras raged without end, the Asuras were guided by their preceptor Shukra. The illustrious son of the sage Bhrigu, wise and far seeing, Shukra understood that as long as death claimed his followers in battle, the Asuras could never prevail. With this resolve, he withdrew from the world and undertook a terrible and prolonged penance to Shiva, seeking the supreme knowledge by which life itself could be restored. Renouncing all comforts, he entered into deep austerity. It is said that he suspended himself upside down, restraining his breath and subsiding only on smoke, remaining unmoved for as long span of time, wholly absorbed in meditation. And this penance was known as Mrit-Sanjeevani Vidya. While Shukra was engaged in his penance, the Asuras were left without their guide and protector. Seeing this as an opportune moment, the Devas, led by Indra, advanced against them with great force, intending to destroy them before the Guru could return, endowed with divine power. Unable to withstand the assault, the Asuras fled and sought refuge in the hermitage of Kavyamata, the devoted wife of Bhrigu and the mother of Shukra. Though dwelling in the quiet sanctity of the ashram, she was a great ascetic endowed with immense spiritual power. Moved by compassion, she granted protection to the fleeting Asuras. When the Devas pursued them into the hermitage, Kavyamata invoked her austerity born power and restrained the gods, rendering them motionless and unable to act. Their strength was checked, and their advance brought to a sudden halt. In their helplessness, the Devas turned to Vishnu, the preserver of the worlds. Perceiving that the balance of the cosmos was in danger, Vishnu acted to restore order. Wielding the Sudarshan Chakra, he struck down Kavyamata, releasing the Devas from her power. Soon after, Bhrigu returned to his hermitage. Beholding his wife slain, he was overcome with grief and anger. Though he knew that Vishnu had acted to uphold cosmic balance, the loss was unbearable. In his sorrow, he pronounced a solemn curse upon Vishnu. Since you have slain my wife, you shall be born again and again in the mortal world, and you shall experience the limitation of earthly existence. Yet Bhrigu, possessed of great spiritual power, did not allow death to prevail. Through his austerity, he restored the wife to life. Still, the incident left an indelible mark, and the curse he uttered would echo through the ages in many incarnations of Vishnu. So, he brought Kavyamata back to life. Meanwhile, far removed from these events, Shukra continued his terrible penance without distraction. At last, pleased by his unwavering austerity, Shiva appeared before him and granted him the boon he sought, the sacred Mṛta-sañjīvanī Vidya, the knowledge by which the dead may be restored to life, back to life. Thus empowered, Shukra returned to the Asuras and became their greatest protector. In every battle that followed, when the Asuras were struck down, he restored them back to life, ensuring that even defeat could not bring their end. In this way, through penance, destruction, curse, and revival, the balance between the Devas and the Asuras was reshaped, each side sustained by its own power, and the cosmic struggle destined to continue. Now, moving on to our next story, Kacha, the son of Brihaspati. In time, the Devas grew deeply troubled by the rising power of the Asuras. Under the guidance of Shukra, the Asuras could no longer be subdued, for even when they were struck down in battle, Shukra restored them back to life through his secret of Mṛta-sañjīvanī Vidya. Seeking to obtain this knowledge, the Devas turned to their preceptor Brihaspati. At his counsel, his own son Kacha was sent to the hermitage of Shukra to become his disciple. Approaching with humility, Kacha bowed before Shukra and asked to be accepted as a student. Though Shukra knew him to be the son of his rival, he did not refuse him, for it was the dharma of a teacher to impart knowledge to one who came in sincerely. Thus Kacha dwelt in the hermitage, serving his teacher with devotion. Over time, he won the affection of Devayani, the daughter of Shukra, who came to regard him with deep attachment. But the Asuras, perceiving his purpose, grew suspicious and resolved to destroy him before he could learn their secret of Mrit-Sanjeevani Vidya. The first death. One day, while Kacha had gone into the forest to tend to the cattle of his teacher, the Asuras seized him, slaying him in secret. They left his body in the wilderness, where it was torn apart and devoured by wild beasts. As evening fell and Kacha did not return, Devayani became anxious and appealed to her father. Moved by her distress, Shukra closed his eyes and through his inner vision perceived what had transpired. Uttering the sacred Mṛta-sañjīvanī mantra, he called Kacha back to life. From the bellies of beasts and the scattered remnants of his body, Kacha was restored and returned unharmed to the hermitage. The second death. Seeing that their efforts had failed, the Asuras devised a harsher plan. Again, they captured Kacha, and this time they slew him, burned his body to ashes, and scattered those ashes far and wide, believing that nothing could be restored from such destruction. Once more Kacha did not return. Devayani, filled with grief, pleaded again with her father. Shukra, bound by his affection for his daughter, invoked the Mṛta-sañjīvanī Vidya mantra. Even from the dispersed ashes, Kach was reconstituted and restored to life, returning once more to the hermitage. Third death. At last, the Asuras resolved upon a final and terrible strategy. Seizing Kacha yet again, they slew him, burned his body to ashes, and this time carefully gathered those ashes. These they mixed into a wine which they offered to Shukra. Unaware of their deception, Shukra drank the wine. When Kacha once again failed to return, Devayani, now overwhelmed with sorrow, begged her father to restore him. Entering deep meditation, Shukra perceived the truth: Kacha was within his own body. This placed him in a grave dilemma. If Kacha were to emerge, Shukra himself would perish. Yet, bound by his duty as a teacher and moved by his daughter's anguish, Shukra chose to act. From within his own body, he imparted to Kacha the sacred knowledge of Mṛta-sañjīvanī Vidya. Having received the knowledge, Kacha tore his way out of Shukra's body, and Shukra fell lifeless. But at once Kacha invoked the very mantra he had learned and restored his teacher back to life. Thus Kacha obtained the secret of resurrection, and the balance between the Devas and Asuras was restored. For the knowledge that had once belonged to one side alone was now shared. In later tradition, it is said that Shukra, reflecting upon the incident, declared that intoxicating drink clouds awareness and leads to downfall, for it was through such means that deception had succeeded even against one who possessed great wisdom. Now, moving on to the next story, the curse of Devayani. When the period of his discipleship had come to an end, Kacha prepared to depart from the hermitage of his teacher, having fulfilled the purpose of which he had been sent. At that time, Devayani, the daughter of Shukra, opposed him with deep emotion. Having long cherished affection for Kacha and having been the cause of his repeated restoration to life, she spoke to him with earnestness and asked that he take her as his wife. But Kacha, steadfast in his understanding of Dharma, replied with restraint and clarity. He reminded her that he had been reborn from the body of her father, Shukra, when he emerged after learning the sacred knowledge of Mrit-Sanjeevani Vidya. By that act, he said, Shukra had become as a father to him in truth, and therefore Devayani must be regarded as her akin to a sister. For this reason, he could not accept her request. Hearing these words, Devayani was overcome with grief and anger. Feeling rejected and dishonored, she pronounced a curse upon Kacha. Though you have obtained the knowledge of Mṛta-sañjīvanī, it shall not serve you. You shall not be able to use it for your own purpose. Kacha, though saddened by the anger, did not remain silent. In response, he spoke a measured but resolute curse. Since you have spoken thus in anger, you shall not be married to a Brahmin. Your husband shall not be one of priestly order. Thus, bounded by their words, the two parted ways. Kacha returned to the Devas bearing the knowledge he had gained, while Devyani remained in her destiny shaped by the very curse she has uttered. In this manner, what had begun as devotion and affection ended in separation and sorrow, and the consequence of that moment would unfold in the generations to come. We have another incident in the Vaman avatar where Shukra appears. Shukra also appears prominently in the story of Vaman avatar, the incarnation of Vishnu. When the Asura king Mahabali prepared the grand gifts during the great sacrifice, Vishnu appeared as a dwarf Brahmin Vamana and asked for 3 steps of land. Shukra, recognizing Vishnu's divine nature, warned Bali not to grant the request, but Bali ignored the warning and agreed. According to the legend, Shukra tried to block the spout of the ritual water vessel so that Bali could not complete the vow. Vaman then used a blade of grass to clear the spout, piercing Shukra's eyes, which is why some traditions say that Shukra became one-eyed. Despite this, Bali fulfilled his promise and Vishnu expanded into his cosmic form to measure the universe in 3 steps. And I just told the story in a short form that this is how Shukra became one-eyed, because in Vaman avatar Vaman basically pierced the blade of grass into the spout or kamundala, and that kamandala, that grass end up piercing Shukra's eyes, and that is why he became one-eyed. Okay, that is why Shukra is having one eye. And you can go and watch my Vaman avatar video if you want to know about the story in depth. And with that, I think we have completed the entire stories of Shukra. So let me just remind you with everything that we have covered so far. Initially, Shukra do the Mṛta-sañjīvanī Vidya, and yeah, I think you have heard the entire story. Then the Kacha incident happens, and then Devayani curse. And with that, I think we have completed the entire story of Shukra. I hope you like it. Thanks a lot for watching.